Take off that uniform, now you're turning this neighborhood into a war zone. That's what Patricia Vaughn shrieked the moment I stepped out of my truck. Picture this. I'm barely back from a memorial service for a fallen friend, still in my army dress, blues boots dusty from the graveside, mind raw from the sound of taps and the widow's sobs. And before I can even shut my door, she's in my face like I'd just driven a tank into her begonias. The whole community center parking lot went dead silent. Some folks stared at their feet, a couple tried not to smile. Yeah, they knew what Patricia was about. I just froze for a second. Hands at my sides, feeling the stares, her voice coming at me sharp as barbed wire. No costumes, no weapons, no uniforms. This is a private community, sir. Take it off or leave. I should probably back up a sec. My name's Luke Harper, retired Master Sergeant, 4 tours in Special Forces, a guy who's buried more brothers than he cares to count. Today I'd stood in front of a flag-draped coffin and spoken for Miguel Torres, a man who took a bullet for me outside Mosul. When his wife asked, I promised to wear my full dress for his memorial. So standing there on my own street, having this lady order me to strip off the uniform I wore for a hero, I just clenched my jaw, tried to keep my voice steady, and said, "Ma'am, this isn't a costume. I came straight from a funeral." She snorted. "Doesn't matter. HOA code says no uniforms. It unsettles the residents. Rules are rules." And that's Oakwood Lane for you. Perfect lawns, friendly waves, and Patricia Vaughn, HOA president, ruler of all. She surveys, clipboard in hand, sweater knotted over her shoulders, even if it's pushing 90 degrees. The day I moved in, she was there before I'd finished unloading, telling me how structured things are here. Her structured meant you mow every Thursday, you don't leave your flag up past sundown, and heaven forbid your dog so much as sneezes after 8 p.m. My dog Tucker, a golden retriever with more personality than most people, barked at a squirrel once, and she left me a letter about noise violations. When she said my American flag was too large and militaristic, I switched it for a smaller one and kept my mouth shut, but I saw her glare every time she walked by my porch. Neighbor Tom, who'd been a paramedic back in the day, warned me, she's got a thing about uniforms. Loves control. Hates anybody who stands up to her. But I figured, how bad could it be? I'd survived IEDs and rocket fire. Surely I could survive a grumpy HOA president. That was before the funeral, before she tried to shame me in front of the whole community for honoring a fallen brother. As she kept ranting about tanks in the driveway, I didn't call the cops. I pulled out my phone and shot a text to Ethan, a fellow vet and advocate, who'd told me, half joking, "Let me know if that HOA ever needs an attitude adjustment." Less than a day later, black SUVs rolled up Oakwood Lane windows, tinted plates, untraceable, and inside a crew of my old brothers from different branches, all wearing veteran outreach shirts, all looking like they'd just come from a recruitment poster. You should have seen Patricia's face when they piled out, shook my hand, and walked with military precision up to my door. We hugged, Tucker jumped all over them, and we fired up the grill for burgers out back. Of course, Patricia couldn't let that slide. She stormed over, waving her phone and shouting about unauthorized gatherings and no uniforms allowed at community events. Ethan just looked at her and said, real calm, "Ma'am, we're here as state-certified veteran advocates protected under federal law. If you keep harassing this man, you're looking at a civil rights lawsuit." She turned pale as milk spun on her heel and stomped away. 2 days later, I got the envelope official. HOA letterhead, all caps, disciplinary hearing scheduled, unauthorized gathering, intimidation, appearance code violations. That Friday, the community clubhouse was packed, neighbors whispering, Patricia at the head table, flanked by her 2 yes-men reading the charges like she was at Nuremberg. I stood tall, flag pin on my chest, hands behind my back, and told the board why I wore my uniform that day. Patricia cut me off. Rules don't bend for anyone. That's when Marcus, my lawyer buddy, and as it turns out, civil rights bulldog, raised his hand and read aloud the U.S. code that protects veterans' rights to wear uniforms in public. "If you discipline him for this," Marcus said, "you're looking at federal discrimination lawsuits and personal liability." The room got real quiet. Then Ethan stood up and said, "Luke saved my life overseas. If you're going to shame anybody for honoring the fallen, you're not running an HOA, you're running a kangaroo court." That cracked the tension. A few people laughed, and old Mrs. Clara Kane in hand piped up, "My son died in Korea. I'd slap anyone who told me to be ashamed of his uniform." At that point, Even Patricia's cronies looked embarrassed. A motion to drop the charges passed unanimously. Patricia's face was beet red, but I could tell by the way she glared at me this wasn't over. Sure enough, the next morning I found my flagpole gone, just the bolts left in the concrete. I confronted her and she just smiled and said, "Maybe it was unstable. Maybe you should rethink your patriotism." When she threatened to report Tucker as a dangerous animal, I realized she'd do anything to get me out. That's when Ethan and I got creative. We launched Project Valor every Saturday. Veterans from all over town gathered in my driveway, caps and medals on coffee in hand, swapping stories. Neighbors started joining us. Some brought pies, some brought stories of their own, and before long, American flags started popping up in front yards all over Oakwood. Patricia screamed about loitering, tried calling the sheriff about illegal weapons, but when the deputies came, all they found were service medals and a legally registered sidearm locked away. They shook my hand and left one muttering, "Too many HOA complaints these days." It escalated 10 SUVs one Saturday, veterans marching up and down the street in an impromptu honor walk, flags waving, kids following behind on bikes. Local news caught wind. Even a city councilwoman, Elena Ruiz, stopped by to thank us for our service. Patricia lost it. She ran up, slapped me in front of half the neighborhood, and the deputies had no choice but to cuff her for assault. At the next HOA meeting, the place was packed, residents spilling out the doors, TV crews outside. Tom took the mic. "Who here thinks Luke's hurting this neighborhood? Or is it Patricia?" The vote wasn't even close. The board announced a formal investigation into Patricia's actions, but she still wasn't done. A week later, some guy in a suit handed me a deed transfer showing my house had been sold to a company run by Patricia's husband. Fraud, plain and simple. The county clerk flagged it before it went anywhere. Marcus filed an injunction and we sued. The day before the court hearing, Patricia stuck a for sale office space sign in my yard with her face on it, trying to mark my home as her new office for her real estate scam. That's when the cavalry arrived. Veterans for justice, local politicians, news crews, even a retired general. We held a rally in my front yard, flags flying, people singing Mrs. Clara reading a poem for the fallen. Elena Ruiz spoke too, calling out HOA abuse and fraud. Patricia tried one last trick, reported me to the IRS for unreported rental income. The agent spent 10 minutes in my kitchen, saw my tax returns, and left shaking his head. Every time she tried to take a shot, it ricocheted right back at her. The court date was wild, packed house, judge barely keeping order. We had video of Patricia trespassing, copies of her forged deeds, and testimony from neighbors she'd harassed for years. The judge took one look at the stack of evidence and said, "This is a disgraceful abuse of power, complaints dismissed, damages awarded, and state protection granted for Mr. Harper." Patricia gasped, literally like someone had pulled the rug from under her. But it didn't stop there. Some nights I'd find my security cameras cut a bullet casing in the mailbox, or some shadowy guy in a van staking out the house. One night, Ethan and I caught two guys trying to break into my garage. Turns out they worked for a security company run by Patricia's cousin. The sheriff called it conspiracy and started an official investigation. And when it finally blew up, it was spectacular. Elena Ruiz organized a town rally. Hundreds showed up, news helicopters circling. The state launched an audit, uncovered Patricia had siphoned over $80,000 from HOA funds into her own accounts. Agents raided her house, let her out in cuffs for fraud and conspiracy, and the board banned her from Oakwood for life. Elena passed a new bill protecting veterans from HOA abuse, and the Joneses next door painted a mural of the American flag on their fence in my honor. Mrs. Clara left a note, "I was scared of uniforms, but you showed us what peace looks like." Patricia's trial made the news for weeks. She lost her license, her reputation, and Oakwood finally breathed easy. Now the air's different in here. Kids play, neighbors talk. My flag flies again, and Tucker's barking at squirrels without a care in the world. I answer the door with my head up, not worried who's out there. And you know what? That feeling, knowing you stood your ground, that you earned your home, that justice meant something, yeah. That's worth more than any medal. But here's the thing, was it really about the uniform, or about power, about control, or about respect? I'd love to hear what you think. Did I go too far? Or was this the only way to fight back? Tell me in the comments, where do you draw the line between order and overreach, and who decides what community means anyway?